So, okay, so we would need 4 people, no more than 2 people.
Oh, your advice triggered me to go look.
I was thinking of it. I ran out of the house. I was like, oh my God, can I have your scraps?
You can have
What are you
this.
doing with the plastic Ziploc bag?
It's what they had.
Dang.
The rest
Oh,
of
they're
the
coming from the
cafe.
house.
No, although I will admit we have a couple of those. We reuse them.
We
until
have
they fall
them,
apart.
but they have their, they have a plastic bag for it.
Good.
Here, you
Thank
want
you.
a few, no, I don't have.
No,
You guys are good to go? Oh, did Dr. Cromwell already get called? No, he just.
he went to the bathroom.
He went to the restroom. There he is.
How's that kidney?
I'm here.
Good. I guess that's bad news.
Well, yeah.
Don, you guys good?
Yes.
You good? Okay. Welcome everybody to our Thursday, January 6th meeting of the Marin Energy Authority. We did convene in closed session for a couple items, and I have nothing to report from those at this time. So the first item is to wish you all a Happy New Year. Welcome to 2011. And then we go to public open time. Yes, sir.
Jim Dyer, get this microphone and work for very well.
Yep.
I'll try to speak up. First, I'd like to a brief discussion on smart meters. I'm surprised at all the negative activity that's taking place, because on every subject there's both a positive and a negative aspect. While you must, of course, treat the negative aspects, you should also recognize that there's some type of utility. There's some positive aspects to it. First, you recognize in the feed-in tariff that there is a differential cost for peak power during the middle of the day. I suspect that you, as well as PG&E, will not far from now instigate time-of-day rates which reflect that subject. And the only way to do that is if you have smart meters that can tell what time-of-day usage was. Second, as a new utility, I'm very uncomfortable with the idea that your cash registers are 60 to 70-year-old electromechanical devices. If I was a new business, I'd be about leery of that subject. And lastly, the state has allowed you to integrate a system where there are 2 suppliers, a single distribution system, and 2 sets of users. Now, when we have a power outage in the future, you know we will have that with our business cycles. People are going to get mad again. Who will get mad at? There'll be no way to tell whether it was you guys or PG&E that did not provide enough power, or whether it was MEA customers or PG&E customers who used too much power late in the afternoon when the sun's going down. You won't be able to tell. So there'll be lawsuits, and only the lawyers will win. But there's one solution: smart meters will tell you time of day usage. And all you have to do is add up your customers' usage so that you know that you provide enough power for them to protect yourself. So you'll have a legal need for these things as well. The second, and I think you should, in your ad, yes, protect your new customers, but also have a positive aspect because you're going to want these things. Next, very briefly on pricing, just some new information in the market. As you know, you have a bargain basement, a recession-based price from Shell, 10 cents per kilowatt hour, roughly, for your green energy. And you're going to get power from landfills for about 14 cents. That's based upon the fact that the fuel is essentially free. All you have to make sure that they don't turn on the natural gas that they run short for landfill gas. But as I told you last July, the windmills on the East Coast are coming in at 22 cents kilowatt hour. And last month, San Francisco, the mayor announced that their large solar panel systems that just started up have come into contract at 23.5 cents per kilowatt hour. Those are rather different numbers than your 10 cents. Your long-range planning people should take note.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I wanted to show you all this book that the WEM youth team put together over the holidays. It's the clippings of the first 3 years of Marine Clean Energy. Really fun to look at. I'll leave it on the table to pass it around. And I also wanted to let you know that I wrote a draft open letter or press release about the Nancy McFadden situation. And the points that I think that I like to make is that she's not only bad for all the local clean energy agencies that Prop 16 were aimed at, but her, having her as Jerry Brown's chief of staff essentially is just a terrible thing for Mr. Brown, given the program that he is talking about. I mean, to me, it reminds me of Obama appointing the Goldman Sachs folks as his financial advisors, sort of on that order. But she's a spendthrift. She plays fast and loose with the public's money. Squandered $46 million of other people's money trying to protect a private corporation against competition. I think frugal Jerry Brown should be thinking about that. Her first job at PG&E was basically influence peddling, persuading, bribing, and buying government officials. Nuclear Notes told a vivid story in 2 lines. Nancy McFadden has been named PG&E Company Vice President of Government Relations. Previously, she held various government-appointed positions. In 2005, PG&E succeeded in killing independent energy efficiency programs and steered millions of dollars, about hundreds of millions of dollars, back to PG&E's monopoly. The CPUC commissioner who pulled this off this coup was McFadden's former energy colleague in Governor Gray Davis's office, Susan Kennedy. Kennedy's prowess raising money from utilities and serving corporate interests above all else made her irresistible to Arnold, who hired her as his chief of staff. PG&E showed its gratitude by rewarding the CPUC judge in the energy efficiency proceedings with an energy fair in her hometown, where she was a public official. The following year, PG&E worked with Kennedy at the governor's office to try to insert this corrupt judge as the head of the California Air Resources Board, tasked with implementing AB 32, the global warming law. Throughout McFadden's tenure, PG&E was constantly promoting its corporate objectives at the city, county, and state level, and it was also the top spender amongst utility lobbyists in Washington, D.C. The company wanted everybody to know it was lobbying for climate legislation, cap and trade, which, by the way, would be a big boondoggle for utilities. But its mandatory lobbying reports show a major emphasis on nuclear power. The nuclear industry was trying to use the climate crisis to railroad Congress into providing loan guarantees for new nuclear power plants, because no bank would consider them unless the risk is loaded on the taxpayers. McFadden advanced as Senior Vice President of Public Affairs, serving from March 1st, 2007 to October 30, 2009. On her watch, the company mounted massive multi-million-dollar marketing and outreach campaigns touting PG&E's supposed achievements in renewables and energy efficiency, which, to make a long story short, are false. They were failing in both energy efficiency and renewables. And of course, during this whole period, PG&E's Public Affairs Department engaged in nonstop warfare against local clean energy efforts. And compliant public officials and
Barbara, I need to have you wrap it up.
I'm sorry, that's it?
Yeah.
Okay, anyhow, I hope that Marine Clean Energy and Marine Energy Authority will weigh in with the governor and try to deal with this.
Thank you, Barbara. Anyone else wishing to speak during open time? Okay, we'll go to our director's report. Dawn?
I have just a couple of items this evening. The first is I wanted to thank all the folks that came out and participated in our holiday gathering last month. It was really great to spend some time with all of you and in a more relaxed setting and get to celebrate some of the achievements over the last year. So thanks to everyone for your contributions and for coming in and being part of that. The next thing is I wanted to just let folks know that one of the outcomes of the Leno hearing that was held in November is a coalition that has been formed to help develop potential CCA cleanup legislation. And so a number of us here in the room have been involved in discussing what might be included in that legislation, and we're working with a coalition of folks, and there should be more information available on that at our very next meeting, so I'll keep folks posted on that. I wanted to put out a reminder that we're going to have our bidders workshop for our RFP that was released last month. That bidders workshop is coming up this Monday. It's going to be at 11 a.m. right here in this room, and so far we've received, looks like we're going to have some good interest in that. We are going to have a dial-in number for folks that aren't able to be here in person, and we've already posted the PowerPoint presentation that we'll be presenting there up on our website, so that's available for folks that want to get a feel for what's going to be included in that workshop. It's at 11 a.m. And we also have a list of sites. There are a number of locations in Marin that might be a good place for developers to site renewable facilities for the local projects. And so I just wanted folks to know that that list is available, and for people that are requesting it, we'll be providing it in hopes that we might help get some good relationships going there between locations and potential developers. Then we also have a solar workshop coming up on January 24th. We've already received 10 RSVPs for that, and we hope to get some more now that the new year has begun. And that workshop will also be held here in this room. And it's going to be looking at really the mechanics of how MEA is providing service to customers to help solar installers and contractors work through the calculations for customers and kind of understand how the interface with MEA works. So we're looking forward to that workshop, and please spread the word if you know anyone that you think might be interested.
John, was that for the feed-in tariff, or is that general supply proposals?
It is general. The solar workshop, are you referring to the solar workshop?
You had mentioned, I think in connection with that workshop, we've already got 10 proposals or 10
RSVPs from solar contractors. Okay. Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, we haven't gotten any bids yet. Those aren't due till February, so I guess people are waiting.
If I may interrupt, just one clarification on the solar workshop that's actually going to be on the 25th.
Oh, thank you. Okay, very good. January 25th. All right. Another thing that's worth noting, we have on December 30th, PG&E came out with a rate adjustment, and John's going to just say a few words about that.
Yeah, so this is an annual rate change that PG&E makes. They call it the annual electric true-up filing. It's really a consolidation of all the various rate changes that have occurred during the year. So it deals with their fuel and purchase power expenses in their era of proceeding. It deals with the DWR contract costs, transmission, distribution, etc. So they made that filing. Overall, it's basically no change in the total rate. The generation cost decreases were essentially offset exactly by non-generation cost increases. So there's no net change in the total rate. One thing that's, I think, noteworthy is that they also have a GRC where PG&E's requested additional cost increases, and that is not reflected yet in the rates, and so there'll probably be another a modest rate increase coming in the March timeframe.
Great, and then two other things I wanted to mention. Our technical committee meeting will be moved because of Martin Luther King Day, so we'll be holding that meeting on January 18th instead of the 17th, and it'll begin at 9 a.m. And then our XCOM meeting will happen at the regular time, January 19th, and both of those meetings will be held down here in the Bora room. And that's all I have. Oh, and I'm sorry, there is one other thing. We are bringing on an intern to help MEA in the office, and she's here with us tonight. This is Amy Romanek, who's in the process of completing her master's at Berkeley. We're really excited to have her joining the team.
Welcome, Amy. Cool.
That's it.
Questions for the director? Okay, thank you, Don. Consent calendar. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
A lot of items on here. A couple months worth of minutes, our monthly budget update. approval of our second addendum with green ideals. There's a motion and a second. Any opposition? That carries unanimously. Next item is our communications update. Looks like Jamie's going to do that. I'll just start as she warms up. I'm seeing us here and there.
All over the
Very
place.
cool. Bus shelters, bus
Yes.
sides.
Yeah, so we actually have a lot to report on today. And our advertising campaign officially started in December, and it'll be running through March with a few other things trailing off through June. And right now, what you'll see out in the public is a series of 3 different messages. And I'll just run through them right now so that you get an idea of what they are. But this is the first that you're probably seeing the most. It's a win-win. Empowering you. And it's working. And on all of our ad campaigns, we've used the slogan, reliable, renewable. And that's also up on our website now. So that's a slogan that you'll see again and again. And it has our information for our website and also our call center to sign up for Deep Green and asking questions. So one of the things right now that you may have seen is our bus ads. So we have advertisements on bus backs that you can see right here, on bus shelters. You can see a little shelter over there with our bus back as well, and also on bus sides. And so right now we have 10 bus shelters throughout Marin, and in your supplemental packet, there's a list of where all those bus shelters are. All of the bus ads have this same ad right now. We really wanted to use the same one in the beginning to get folks accustomed with our ad and used to seeing it and getting some recognition with it. And in mid-February, we will all be changing out to another ad, which will be empowering you. So we also have 16 bus sides that we have right now and 17 bus backs. And so there's another shelter. One of the other things that we have right now is our movie theater ads. And I'm actually going to have Beth DJ for us, but you may have seen some of our ads, but music on So that's the ad that's currently playing in 6 different movie theaters in Marin. And we'll be switching out the messaging and the graphics with 3 new messages and 3 new sets of graphics. And that is scheduled to change later this month, actually. So that will be changing with the 3 new messages in those 6 theaters. And there was in your board packet a list of those movie theaters. So if you go there, you can see our ads there as well. We also have our advertisements in the Marin IJ and the Pacific Sun, and here's a Marin IJ ad. So it's running twice a week in the Marin IJ, and it's running on every Sunday, and then it's alternating on other weekdays. It's also running in the Pacific Sun right now with a half page per week, and we'll be switching out the messaging again with the win-win, empowering you. Oops, sorry about that. And empowering you. And we also have our ads on the websites for the Marin IJ and the Pacific Sun, and they'll also be switching out with 3 new messages and ads that I will show at the February board meeting. Another place where we have our ads is on the ferry schedule, and I put our ferry schedule on all of your seats so that you can see it. This was the first ad that we developed, so it looks a little bit different than the other ones. We developed this one on the fly. I think we had a 2-day turnaround on it, but we'll be switching that again 3 months into it. And the last one that will be coming out in February is for the North Bay Business Journal, and that's going to be in their green business issue for February. So that's the update with the ads right now. And the other thing that I wanted to mention was that we printed and delivered the the briefing booklet that we've discussed at some of the other board meetings. And it was distributed to key decision makers throughout the state, including all of your city and town council members and your city managers. And it highlights the achievements of MEA as well as the challenges we've faced, in hopes that we can get some regulatory and legislative support to help alleviate some of those challenges. And I believe I have just a photo of what the cover page looks like. So that is all I have for the communications update, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
I'll have to say that I experienced some repeated post-traumatic stress symptoms when I looked through the 8 pages of the challenges. It was brutal looking back at some of that history. I hope I never see this stuff again. Oh my God, so brutal. But it's a beautiful piece. And have you gotten any feedback from the governor or any of the other folks you sent it to?
We haven't at this point.
I
Good
did
job.
get some feedback from San Francisco. They really like it. I think it's going to be very useful in a number of ways.
Good. Good. Well, it's
Yeah.
a beautiful, if painful, document.
Jamie, how's your tweeting going lately?
Yeah.
We're keeping busy with it, so I don't know if any of you are following us, but I know
Oh my
some of you
God.
are fans on Facebook, but it's going well. We're keeping our status updates. I did send an email to all of you with the one example of some folks who responded to an article about us with some inaccurate information that we were able to clear up, but there hasn't been anything like that recently.
And Jamie also pulled together some information on the benefits of social media.
Yeah, that's included
Yes.
in your
Oh, very good.
packet as well.
That's good. Really good.
I would remark that you did a very compelling education and argument in that material you offered about social networking.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was good.
It was excellent.
Made a convert of me.
Good.
Although I've yet to see any tweet of any kind.
It's not for everyone.
Do you feel bad if you don't get them or what?
I'm avoiding it
Where
as
do
long
we
as
get
I
'em?
can.
Oh.
Any other questions for our marketing director?
No.
Hey, Jamie,
Good job,
thanks.
Jamie.
Good work. I have to say, it's extraordinarily satisfying to see the classy branding look that you guys have developed for us.
A big thanks to Green Ideals for that.
Way to go.
It's really
cool.
nice.
It's like we're growing up.
Thank you, Susan. Yes.
Thank you. Okay, next up would be unless there's any public comment on that. Presentation from Infotility on the Smart Grid pilot project and its potential application to MEA programs.
Yeah, and I'll say just a couple of words while they're getting set up here. We've invited Infotility here tonight for a number of reasons. First of all, we're familiar with their work through a grant proposal that we worked with them on about 2 years ago, a DOE grant proposal. And also, I'm familiar with them because of my work at the County of Marin, working on some smart grid demonstration projects back as early as 2007. They've been working on getting some of the renewable installations at the county integrated and in a state where they can kind of be monitored in real time. And the reason why that relates to MEA is that we have some renewable projects, and we're going to be having more of them, particularly as we bring in folks through the feed-in tariff program, folks through the net energy metering tariff program even, and if we do the solar cooperative program, there are going to be some interesting ways that we might want to be able to monitor how much energy is being generated, and we may even want customers to be able to monitor how much they're using and generating in real time. So there's a lot of interesting capability here that Infotility has to offer, and I wanted to provide them with an opportunity to just give us an overview of what types of things they can do so that we can think about how we might be able to use it on a going forward basis, and also because our technical committee is going to begin delving into the world of demand response soon and looking at folks that we might be able to work with to provide demand response rates to customers. So that's something that we'll be touching on a little bit in this presentation as well. So I'm going to turn it over to y'all to
Well, thanks, Don, and thanks to the board for giving us a few minutes of your time. My name is Rich Barone. This is Jim McCrae. I am the VP of Business and Product Development within Infotility, and and Jim's the COO. And we're going to give a very brief presentation on a lot of points that Don just referenced, and then Jim's going to show you a little bit about a current application we have running so you can get a sense of what this might look like. You can go to the next slide, Jim. Infotility is a smart grid software provider. We've been around for about 9-10 years now. We were started in California. We relocated to Boulder in 2004. I've been with the company about 3 years. Since 2004, we've been funded with quite a bit of DOE money to expand on an interesting core platform from which we've now extended into our flagship application, the Smart Community Manager, which is a very modular and comprehensive application, and we'll get into a little bit of those features. If you want to go to the next slide. This is a project that Don alluded to. We've been working with the County of Marin on integrating a lot of different edge devices, demand, PV, wind turbines, demand response, and we've been doing it with the county buildings here in Marin. It's been a few years going on, and about $1.5 million. We've learned a lot of lessons along the way. The accomplishments have been not only the integration of a lot of different data points, but the ability to interact with those data points. And for us, it's been the development of the foundation of our Smart Community Manager, which has, as I said, a lot of different modules for different markets. If you go to the next slide, Jim, our CCA market, we feel, can utilize very effectively these modular components. I took the liberty of looking at the MEA's plans and putting together what I thought might be a viable timeline. But I wanted to articulate these modules, give a little bit of a definition, and then the next slide underscores the value to the different users of the application. The first up there, you'll see the feed-in or renewable project monitoring. I think it's going to bear great relevance for the MEA as you continue to develop your own renewable and other distributed resources. Just getting a sense of how those are producing and what they're doing, and looking at models over time, and we can get into a little bit of the value proposition on the next slide. Commercial demand response, as Don alluded to, is not only a great lever for managing your supply-demand balance, but does provide revenue for various participants. We're currently being funded now by the DOE to develop a plug-in electric vehicle agent as part of our Grid Agents platform. We know that there's going to be a deployment of some of those resources here in this county, and we'd love to be able to monitor and offer other kind of interactive mechanisms for plug-in electric vehicles within the county. And economic planning is really the, I skipped over solar shares or solar cooperatives. This is you all probably know what this is, but it really gives homeowners or residents the opportunity to buy into a community or municipal system. They have a percentage share of that system, and then we provide through this tool the ability for that homeowner to see what their home demand is relative to how much their percentage of the system is producing, so it creates a virtual net meter for the homeowner. The economic planning piece is effectively the special sauce, if you will, at the end of the day for our grid agents. It takes all of our interesting monitoring, forecasting, projections, and interactability to the next level, because it allows the MEA, in this case, to look at current conditions, and we execute various algorithms on current conditions to provide action plans, at least cost planning action plans, given all the levers that you eventually will have to work with by the time we get to the end of the timeline. If you want to just go to the last slide, Jim. So I did my best to give a very broad brush here, and I'll certainly entertain any questions on it, but I wanted to provide a context for what is the value proposition for the different entities that will have looks into the application. I think I'd focus on the MEA because that's who we're speaking to now, obviously, but you know, the ability to not only see what's going on in terms of your entire program demand curve is not only useful, but when you start to combine that with your system-wide production and forecasts, and then you start to look at the different mechanisms you have to alter demand or alter, you know, obtaining different resources. It not only gives you tools to play with economically, but it also gives you the ability to, we talked a little bit about this earlier today, to then do audit trails on what are the typical demand curves, what are the, in aggregate and individually, the production curves for all the resources. What that allows the MEA to do is on a year in and year out basis say, okay, well, we realize we probably need resources to fill in these valleys in our production curves relative to demand, and as a consequence, we can adjust rates accordingly. So it really serves as a forward-thinking economic planning tool for the MEA moving forward. In terms of the other users, I talked a little bit about solar shares. Quick scenario that we discussed today. If I'm a homeowner, I live, you know, up in under redwoods, I can't put a PV system on my house. Well, maybe I can buy into to a solar share, and what do I get? Well, I'll see my house's demand, I'll see what my production is, and then on top of that, given that we'll have real-time intervals on this, probably upwards of 1 to 5 minutes, I can actually take a look at that as a homeowner and say, oh, geez, well, what's this costing me right now? How am I doing? And what happens if I go and turn off my TV, computer, and washing machine all at once? Within the next 5 minutes, you actually see a real-time change on your net meter and a dollar amount calculation. And I think that that can actually affect behavioral change, but it's also something that will give the residents of Marin County the sense that the MEA is really out in front of this stuff. This is a really cool instrument for me to use that hasn't previously been offered. The commercial customers here in Marin County will also have a similar audit trail for their own uses and trackability, especially with respect to demand response. And you know, we did talk a little bit about demand response with the MEA earlier today. It's something we have done a lot of work in the industry, and I think this tool can serve as a real moneymaker for these commercial participants to create real revenue streams, not to the exclusion of the MEA as well. So that in a nutshell is my presentation in terms of the application, its modules, and how the MEA might benefit from that. And we look forward to continuing these discussions. I'm going to hand it over to Jim, who's going to just give you a very brief walkthrough of a couple of scenarios in our application that we have running at the county buildings here, so you can see some of the things that we can do.
Okay, I need a minute to get totally set up here, but we'll be ready to go. Okay, here. So what we've developed with the Smart Community Manager is a tool that allows you to look at the renewable production of facilities that you have under monitoring. You can look at the net metering, and you can look at the total energy usage of those buildings. And we've set it up using a Google-like interface where you can click on particular pointers and say, here's the health and services building in Marin, and right now it's not really producing any PV, but its demand is 105 kilowatts at that building. So you have real-time access into what's happening at each of your buildings around your.
Did somebody leave the lights on over there or something?
There's stuff running all the time over there.
Gotta give Larry Meredith a call.
Yeah.
So they're part of your project, and that's why you have this data on them?
Yes, we have 5 buildings we're working with right now. The main buildings are the Health and Human Services building at 120 Redwood that has a 200 kW PV system on it. We have the Civic Center under monitoring, but there's no renewable production there. We have the county garage, which is about a 75 kW PV system, plus another 100 kW in building demand. And then we have the exhibition hall, which has the convention center and other facilities in it. And they have a 200 kilowatt PV system. So we've got a large amount of renewables at multiple buildings. We're tracking their net metered data as well, which is the 5-minute interval data coming off their PG&E meters. And for the first time, we've been able to bring those two data streams together and look at what the actual loads, for example, on those buildings are. And that gives you a real picture into how much that renewable system is really providing you with on a day-to-day, hour-by-hour basis. So it's got the capability here as you add sites. We kept our project simple because it allowed us to focus on getting the monitoring right and producing data, but you can certainly add sites, and we're talking with facilities right now about adding sites in a number of other places in the county to the DOE project we're currently conducting. So our interface here provides a number of bits of information that you never had access to before, but could be very useful as you deploy your feed and care programs and other programs. That as we add sites to it, we track the actual current production of all those sites in aggregate, the actual production for the last 7 days, 30 days, and pretty much any other time you wanted to calculate, and give you a real-time picture. We were doing a presentation this afternoon with Kirby and John and Dawn, and they were watching as we were talking the output of the 4 buildings' PV systems change in real time. So that's a map view that we provide that basically allows you to explore the sites and drill down into things just like you could with Google, for example. The second area I wanted to show you today is that we're not only tracking that data, kind of in real time, but we're keeping a historical record. So we're able to dive into the data, and for example, here we're looking at the last 7 days of PV production across all of the systems we have under monitoring on an hour-by-hour basis. And we could theoretically, there we go, explore that and see that in the, say at 12 noon on the 4th, the 3 or 4 systems were producing 245 kW in total. And we could dive down in and see what the components were for each of the buildings. Now, to keep this presentation quick and simple to the point, the other thing I wanted to bring up is that for each of the buildings, we're monitoring the PV production, we're monitoring the net metering for PG&E, and then we're calculating on the fly the total building loads for those buildings. So for the first time, Dawn and the energy managers over at the county can see what their buildings are actually using, as well as what the PG&E meter says they're using. So what you're looking at here are the load profiles for 3 days for the county garage building over, to the Western Pacific Center. And we're monitoring the PV, in blue, the PV output, and you can see it's fairly regular output on a day-to-day basis. Right now in the middle of the winter, we're seeing about 40 kW out of that 75 kW system. This green line that you see is the net meter. This is what you're buying from MEA and PG&E at that facility. And you can see that as the PV system starts producing more energy, you're buying less energy from MEA and PG&E through the net meter. But what you never see is how much energy is that building really using on an ongoing basis. And that's the orange graph, which is basically the sum of the other two. And using that, the energy managers and MEA could then say, now we really understand what these buildings are using, even though they have PV production and net metering, and we can analyze what types of other opportunities, be they demand response or vehicle charging, would be appropriate for those buildings at different times. Without going into a whole lot of other stuff in there, that gives you kind of an idea of the level of detail that you can dive into the data on a day-by-day, hour-by-hour basis. It goes back as long historically as you've metered and will move out into the future. It's very easy for us to add buildings and other facilities, and as the market opens up and data becomes available through the, say, smart meters and through the meter data providers that are associated with the solar industry will be able to take those streams and aggregate it all in one place for an entity or a community like Marin to look at on an ongoing real-time basis.
Great. Really intriguing. Thank you. Thank you very much. Questions?
I have a question about what other states are you doing business in? I mean, do you have certain states that are more deregulated than the state of California in terms of the energy market and that are taking off on this and further along on the smart grid stuff or
right,
smart metering?
We're doing projects right now in New York, working with Con Edison, Verizon, and a demand response aggregator that's doing multiple Verizon buildings using our software. All of our work to date has been funded by the DOE and it's been in an R&D phase.
Oh, cool.
And we've just gotten 2 grants from the DOE to now move this into a commercial demonstration or pilot stage, working with different entities, be they investor-owned utilities or communities or CCAs like MEA in this case. So we're moving to that stage now. We're looking and planning discrete pilot projects beyond what we've been doing here into the marketplace.
So this is one of your pilot projects?
Yes.
And you have an endpoint? What's your goal, or just to demonstrate your capabilities?
Our goal is to move this software out of R&D demonstrations into the market and expand as entities like a utility or a MEA expand and have hundreds and then thousands of potential.
And how long has this been going on in Marin?
We've been working with Marin since 2007. Yeah, working specifically with Dawn and the Sustainability Office staff, as well as Marin facilities.
Sir, you just mentioned something in your last explanation about demand response aggregation. I think is a term that you used.
Yeah.
Can you say more about that and how that works with CCA?
Yeah, it's an interesting.
How they play together.
Right. Well, I think to be candid, it's a yet to be determined scenario,
Okay.
and we talked about 3 different scenarios today. I can use as a baseline what we are doing right now in New York, because that commercial product will be launched in April, and it's effectively our commercial demand response module in its entirety. The way that works is Demand Response Aggregator has a number of different commercial customers with whom they've registered to a number of different demand response programs, some of which are initiated by the ISO system level, some are initiated by the transmission operator, and a new one, which we're helping Con Edison to launch, is initiated by the distribution utility. The application then run by the demand response aggregator enables various triggers for demand response requests, if you will, to come through it. It recognizes, based on the buildings we have on the back end, which ones can participate, how much it can actually accomplish in terms of curtailment, and then enables the automatic dispatch of curtailment commands in accordance with whatever time sequences the program call it dictates, and then enables tracking thereof. The application as a whole has 3 users. One is the demand response aggregator, that's sort of the mothership. One is for all of the facilities that are participating, so they have a view into what's happening in audit trail and also the ability to opt out if need be. And then the third interface is for the actual utility to engage their own distribution utility driven demand response program. All of those programs have different incentives associated with it. That's all calculated and calibrated by the application. The way it works with most demand response aggregators is they do the legwork, they invest in whatever equipment and controls are necessary on the building side. They lay out that money much like an ESCO might do. And as these buildings earn incentives through the program participation, the aggregator takes a certain percentage of those incentives, typically 30% neighborhood, and then 70% gets passed along to the end customer. Many such programs exist. There's 6 different programs that the Cal ISO initiates. either directly or through vehicles like PG&E. They all have different incentive rates and structures associated with it. One scenario could be that the MEA could play the role of the demand response aggregators and therefore generate its own revenue stream by doing that same ESCO type role, maybe using a subcontractor to help with engaging the buildings and so forth, and doing the cash outlay, but then recouping the benefits, ad infinitum. Another scenario might be to avoid that role and partner with a demand response aggregator to, accrue a slew of commercial customers within the county, maybe working out some sort of revenue share arrangement with the demand response aggregator. And the third would be to do the same scenario without the revenue share. However, one thing that I wanted to underscore with respect to the economic planning function of the grid agent's core here is that we could help the MEA launch its own demand response program so that, causally speaking, the MEA might look at the information we're providing. For example, one thing that we didn't really focus on is our core agents take all of this data and weather data and past data, and we do forecast modeling for both demand and production. So one possible scenario for a demand response program might be this. You have spot market prices, current and forecasted. You have demand scenarios and production scenarios. And somebody at the MEA is monitoring the application and says, we're going to be in trouble tomorrow, it looks like, because spot market prices are going to be high, and it looks like we might have a little bit of a shortfall on our production portfolio relative to tomorrow's demand. What do? Well, maybe there's an MEA demand response program triggered through the application with commercial partners that says, you know what, we're going to ask you to do this curtailment for tomorrow to get us into more of a load balance here. And there's going to be, and in that scenario, it would likely be a variable incentive based on whatever the offset was from the avoided cost of the spot market prices. Now, that's a hypothetical scenario, but probably not too far off of what we might be able to enable the MEA to initiate on its own accord. And maybe it's some combination of native demand response coupled with participating with the Cal ISO programs. It's unclear, but it's certainly something we spoke with John and Kirby earlier today about, and it's something they're taking a very serious look at moving forward. And certainly if this relationship continues to flourish, we can take an active role in helping to enable whatever conclusions they come to.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you.
Can I ask a little thing?
Sure.
Can you explain the difference in the energy detective TED meter and its real-time monitoring and the software? One of the big things happening in Marin is smart meters and their accuracy, and maybe you could explain a little bit on this, how people could verify their consumption on these robbing smart meters. Maybe you can add your 2 bits about what the smart meters are doing to people.
Well, I'll claim some ignorance on, I hadn't heard about accuracy discrepancies with respect to smart meters. What I can say is what we've done thus far in this case is we have injected our own CTs on the meters to do active on-the-fly readings to serve as effective validation. It's likely not a cost-effective solution. However, the TED meters are pretty inexpensive devices, and that's actually an interesting opportunity for the MEA. One thing we talked about earlier today was what helps the MEA really get a program-wide sense of the demand curve is to start getting the smart meter data feeds directly from PG&E, which at the very least we can get on a daily basis, but we pushed for 5-minute intervals. It would be a very interesting endeavor to cross-reference that with a limited deployment of TED meters to get a certain sample size to say, well, we have now 2 data sources from the same meter. Is there a discrepancy? And that's something I hadn't considered because, frankly, I hadn't known that there was some discrepancies with these smart meters. So it'd be interesting to learn a little bit more about that and see what we could provide to mitigate that and help protect the ratepayers here from getting ripped off.
Yeah, that's a big problem. I've met people having their consumption double on the average when the smart meters come in Marin. The other thing is, can this monitor, the other big problem in this area is people stealing the solar panels. Like the Marin Water Board, can it monitor there if there's a theft?
Actually, right now, we've set up some rudimentary alerts with Marin facilities, and the problem we have here is that inverters trip off and they don't automatically come back on for one reason or another. So we've created a set of warnings that says if the production doesn't look like the forecast and doesn't look like what it's historically been over similar days, send an alert out and say, hey, you better go out and take a look at that. Something's wrong with your system.
Yeah, well,
they swipe them overnight when it would be off.
Pardon?
They swipe them overnight. When it would
That's
be
what
off.
I've been hearing, that out, especially out in West Marin.
That's interesting. Well, you certainly get an alert first thing in the morning. Might be too late by then, but at least you know you have a problem.
Yeah. I think a lot of this whole meter data area is yet to be determined. That, you know, there's talk of all the data coming from the smart meters being available on a real-time basis by the end of 2011. There are meter data providers that are now required to be contracted with for all new PV systems going in, and as a result, that data is becoming available, and those data streams are only going to inform the communities and anyone else who's engaged with those customers in future years.
I think that
right now,
one of the fundamental points, I mean, strip away a lot of the details and nuances to what we've talked about in different modules and different functions. Fundamental point here is that with more PV, with more data available for demand, with electric vehicles coming online, with demand response programs, you're going to have innumerable data streams from multiple sources. And the fundamental value, before, above and beyond, or before anything else foundational to this application, is we provide a one tent under which we can bring in all of the data and make sense of it all. Bring it all together for the use of the residents, the commercial customers, and the MEA. And I think that needs to be underscored as there's going to be more and more, not less and less data. We provide a one-stop shop for that data relative to each other.
Thank you, gentlemen.
okay.
Thanks for your
I'm
time.
so sorry, I gotta ask one last one.
Okay.
Really quick, I promise. Do you think that access to data, this future data that you're referencing, is gonna be a problem with respect to just accessing it? I mean, do the IOUs control that data since they manage the smart meters? And is that gonna be an issue that we need to address?
I think it's an issue that's being addressed by the PDC.
It is already?
Right now, it's come up numerous factors from little guys like us to the big guys like Google that are all saying, the public should be able to opt into providing their data to third-party providers.
Good.
And I sense that the MEA has a lot more of a claim. We talked a little bit about this today, even more so than the ratepayers for that data. It's going to be an easier sell, notwithstanding whatever relationship exists with PG&E. They, at the very least, you'll be able to get it on a daily basis as of right now. What we would drive for is to let's get some real significant intervals of that data as we move forward.
Thank you.
Don, are we developing internal confidentiality protocols and so forth? Is there anything special we need to do to make sure we protect a customer prior? I mean, we already get that kind of data, and so
yeah,
no doubt.
we already have those policies and procedures in place internally because we do have staff and consultants do need to have access to some confidential data, and so all of our thanks a lot. Our staff and consultants that are accessing that data have to sign NDAs and that sort of thing. We've also signed non-disclosure agreements with PG&E in order for them to provide us with the data. However, PG&E is not always willing to provide us with the data, even though those agreements are in place. So I think that the issue that was just raised is a significant issue, and it's something that we'll be working with them on, hoping that the PUC will help interface and make sure that we're able to access data that we need so that we can help customers and so that we can provide it to customers in an aggregate way.
Great, thank you. Awesome. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate the overview.
Thank you.
Helpful. Interesting. Good glimpse of the future, too. Good. Next up is the overview of our power charge and difference adjustment issue at the PUC.
This one is mine. Do I need that mic? This is just for
You're
the.
welcome to go up there or
That one's taped. Or you want to do this?
I'll pick you up even if it's not right.
Okay, so that was an interesting presentation. I don't have any cool software to show you. We're kind of getting back to regulatory stuff.
Yeah.
But this is at least exciting to me. What's going on with PCIS? Bear with me. Just going to give an overview of some activities that are going on at CPUC right now, aimed at reforming the power charge and difference adjustment. And that's really a component of the exit fee that our customers pay and any other CCA or direct access customers pay. So just by way of background, what is the PCIA? This is the charge that the utilities, PG&E, assesses on a CCA customer's bill to essentially keep the utility whole from any losses that they might see or any cost shifting that might occur to remaining bundled customers as customers sort of leave the utility supply portfolio. So it's really the uneconomic or above market cost of the utility generation that is translated into a surcharge that CCA customers pay. And it's set annually. It's actually set in the ERA proceeding. And it's really the methodology is this indifference principle. And what that means is that bundled customers, remaining customers of PG&E or the other utilities are supposed to be economically indifferent to customers choosing to be served by a CCA. That's the sort of guiding principle behind the way that the charge is developed. And I know we've talked about this, but just to complete the background section here, the basic approach is to look at, on a projected basis for the next year, the average cost of the utilities generation portfolio and compare that to the market value or the estimated market value. And that estimated market value is determined using a transparent benchmark. It's based on some published forward prices for the year plus some various adjustments. So that's the basic concept. Right now, the MEA rate structure provides a credit to its customers to offset that surcharge that's applied by PG&E. And the total amount of that credit is about $2.3 million a year for our current Phase 1 customers. So, we've long known, and I think others have long known, that there are problems with the PCIA methodology. This was first raised by the city of Victorville a couple of years ago. We brought it up in PG&E's recent ERA proceeding that there are flaws in this methodology which basically result in customers being overcharged. We were unsuccessful in the ERA proceeding just on procedural grounds. The commission granted PG&E's request to strike our testimony, ruling that it was outside the scope of that proceeding. But we did raise the awareness, and both our participation as well as San Francisco's participation in that proceeding we started to get some traction on the issue. And so soon after that, working with Dan Douglas, our regulatory attorney, we formed a coalition with other parties, direct access parties, some large customers. You can see the list here, to really kind of urge the CPUC to establish a process where we could get this methodology litigated. And we have a very broad coalition there with some large customers. The Cal State system is in that group, As I mentioned, San Francisco, and then also some ESPs on the direct access side. So happily, the CPUC granted the joint parties' request to establish a proceeding to address this. We wanted to get this done as quickly as possible. And so we chose to request that this be evaluated in the existing proceeding, and that's what the commission agreed to do. So the proceeding number is there for those who are interested, but the long and short of it is procedurally, the commission established a series of workshops, which we've held. There were 4 workshops. We were very busy in December, meeting with the utilities. And then we will be putting testimony in at the end of this month. You see the rest of the process there. The schedule calls for a proposed decision at the end of May 24th. The problems with the PCIA, just at a high level, there's really 3 flaws in the methodology. I mean, you can take a step back and say it's a flaw to have this thing at all. We chose not to go that direction because we're really looking to sort of make a surgical strike here to improve the economics for our customers. And we thought the best way to do that would be to use the existing methodology but reform it so that it more accurately reflects the market value of the utility portfolio. So the 3 flaws are, first, the way that this market benchmark is currently set, it does not account for at all the value of the renewable portfolio, the premium value of the renewables that we're being charged for through of PG&E's renewables in their portfolio. It's as if everything's valued as if it's brown power. So as a result, market's undervalued and the surcharge is excessive. Second flaw is that the market benchmark does not reflect the value of the services provided by the California Independent System Operator, various scheduling and grid management services that are reflected in the rate and therefore are reflected in the PCIA. Those need to be removed because those costs are avoided when load migrates over to a CCA. So by not removing them, by not including them in the benchmark, customers ultimately would be double charged for that. And then the third flaw that we pointed out is that the portfolio does not reflect the value of peak resources that are in the portfolio. The portfolio is being valued as if it's a base load type of resource, just flat 24/7 power deliveries. In reality, we know there's more power that needs to be produced during the kind of higher cost peak periods, and therefore the market value of a portfolio that does that is higher. So those are the 3 areas that we've made proposals to address. We can go to the next slide. So we the joint parties got together and put a proposal together, and we presented it at the first workshop. The utilities came back with, the good news here, I think, is that the utilities came back with a proposal that addressed each of the flaws that we pointed out. They had a little bit different way of dealing with them, but we weren't arguing about whether it's appropriate to make these adjustments. We were just arguing about how to make the adjustment, what's the best way to make the adjustments. We put a counter proposal in late December, and we just discussed that the other day at the 4th workshop. And I think methodologically we're not that far apart. The biggest sticking point is, how do we value that renewable attribute today when there's no real liquid market, there's no transparent price benchmark that you can point to and say, everybody can agree that the premium value of renewables is X. That just doesn't exist. The utilities came in with a very low number. We came in with a very reasonable number based on recent utilities purchases. And
run for office.
So I think there's some ground there for potential settlement. I don't think that's going to happen in the immediate future. I think we're going to have to go through the testimony and potentially hearings, but I'm optimistic. I don't think we're all that far apart. The biggest sticking point is that Edison, in particular, they want to bring in a whole bunch of extraneous issues to have a bigger sort of package to trade off one against the other. We're not implicated by those issues. They're direct access issues, so we've been very adamant, no, we just want to stick to dealing with the PCIA, and if we need to go to hearings, we'll go to hearings. So in terms of potential reductions in the PCIA, if we're successful in this, they can be quite significant. Right now, we're crediting, these are in dollars per megawatt hour, so we're crediting about $15 a megawatt hour through our rate structure. And if we're successful at the sort of the high end of what is possible here, we could be reducing that PCIA by $20 a megawatt hour. So basically it would be zero because it's not going to go negative. So if we're successful, there's potential that we can cut that PCIA down to zero. Even at the low end, and these are more reflective of the utility numbers, you know, there's potentially a reduction here in the $5 per megawatt hour range. So that's it. If there's any questions, I'm happy to talk some more. Yes?
I'm just killing you guys tonight, sorry. On that previous slide right there, if you can go back one. If we end up with what you hope for, with the
$20?
The highest reduction, yeah, that essentially nets it out or brings it to zero, does that nullify the argument about restructuring the timing of the PCIA and shortening the length of time that it's, because it's currently, what, at a 10-year period?
No, I don't think it, it doesn't nullify it. I think that's still, and I think what you're talking about is the utilities get stranded cost recovery for a 10-year period. So they do a new deal, a new generation contract, for instance. That resource is eligible to be included in the PCIA for 10 years. There's nothing that says that next year the PCIA couldn't be a positive number. I mean, you know, if it's really a function year by year of the value of the portfolio versus whatever the market is at that point in time. So I think it still would be important.
So that would be sort of like right now?
That would be,
How it would
yeah,
impact us
that
now.
would be 2011.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Thanks.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, John. Great.
Keep going for that one.
Next up is interconnection procedure and development mechanics.
It's the brainiac night.
Huh?
It's the brainiac night.
Yeah, I know.
Well, I'm sorry to say this presentation has a title that's about as dry as the last one. I'm without glossing over the entirety of the presentation, I know that certain members of your board requested to hear a little bit more about what was involved in interconnecting generation projects to the system. And so this presentation is really intended to provide you with that detail, and some of it I'll go into, some of it I won't. But I would encourage you to kind of look through it at your leisure if you have additional interest in finding out the specifics. Really what we're going to be focusing on here today are distribution level interconnections. And what I mean by that is projects that are connected to the distribution system as it's classified. And what that means is 60 kilovolts and below. So this is basically the voltage that's carried in the lines, and that, as far as voltages go, that's a pretty low level. So the distribution system is kind of the bulk of what you see out there around your homes, effectively. And we're going to look at two processes in particular here that'll be applicable for projects that would be interconnecting under our FIT, as well as potentially under the RFP that's coming up. And those are the small generator interconnection procedures and then the fast track interconnection procedures for relatively small projects. And then we'll talk about some other considerations too. As far as jurisdiction is concerned, all wholesale interconnections are kind of presided over by the FERC, or the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. They're the ones that are responsible for reviewing and approving tariffs that specify the details related to interconnecting projects. And then for retail connections like net energy metering, the PUC oversees those rules and regulations related to connecting PV systems on your rooftop to the distribution system. And the nature of the interconnection, just kind of as an aside, but the nature of the interconnection, the type of interconnection affects eligibility for certain incentives. So if it's a behind the meter interconnection, like on your house, a residential PV facility, those would maintain eligibility for these rebates and funds that are available. And then outside the meter, that kind of reduces the eligibility and eliminates it, in fact, for those types of incentives like the California Solar Initiative. As far as responsibilities go, clearly MEA, as a generation service provider, that's our sole focus. We don't have any responsibilities whatsoever for maintaining, studying, or otherwise interconnecting projects to the transmission and distribution system. That's entirely PG&E's responsibility. Go ahead. Yeah, there you go. And as far as interconnecting goes, there are multiple application processes. I mentioned the voltage issue. And so the level at which you're going to interconnect to the system dictates who you'll be dealing with when you're interconnecting. So 60 kilovolts and below, you're going to be dealing with PG&E. Above 60 kilovolts, you're going to be dealing with the California Independent System Operator. And then those respective entities will be completing studies based on who you're dealing with to determine the impacts to the system of connecting those particular projects. So I think we can go ahead and go on to the next slide here. This here just details out the 3 different processes that are applicable for interconnecting with PG&E's distribution system. There's the LGIP, or Large Generator Interconnection Procedure, and that's for projects of size 20 megawatts and above. So kind of, not your small scale projects by any means, but certainly not large baseload projects either. This process is generally applicable for projects that will have relatively meaningful impacts to the system and will require certain infrastructure upgrades to be put in place before those particular generators can reliably interconnect with the system. And then the SGIP, or Small Generator Interconnection Procedures, are applicable to facilities less than 20 megawatts in size. Those facilities typically come with lower interconnection costs, and then the study durations for determining the impacts of those facilities tend to be a little shorter, and the studies themselves tend to be a little less rigorous because of the size of the project being put on the grid. And then that last line item there, the fast track, if you could just scroll up one slide, Yurdis. Perfect. This last one here is something that will hopefully be applicable to applicants under our feed-in tariff, because this is without question the fastest way to get a project interconnected. It's really geared for projects that will have little to no impact to the system when being interconnected, and as a result, little to no infrastructure costs, and the timeline is significantly expedited. So in any case, what do you do if you're not sure about the details? We've had some questions come up. Well, how do people know what to do? If I'm a generator, or if I'm a wannabe generator, and I think I've got a project opportunity in mind, how do I know that it's viable from an interconnection perspective? And there's a pre-application assessment that's in place whereby you can contact PG&E, give them a prospective location of your project, and they'll get back to you with some pertinent details about the various infrastructure that's in place and other similar projects that are in their generation queue, their interconnection queue. And that'll kind of get your bearings, so to speak, as to where you fit in and where it is that you might need to interconnect that project so that it functions properly and reliably. And kind of importantly, it's important to know that PG&E is obligated to provide this information pursuant to their wholesale distribution tariff. So this is a FERC-approved tariff All of this language is spelled out in the tariff, and any prospective generator can go and reference that to get this information. So assuming you're ready to move forward with an interconnection request, there are certain activities that you need to complete in order to get in PG&E's distribution generation interconnection queue. And that is basically a list, sequential list of applicants that are seeking interconnection of their respective projects to the distribution system. And in order to do that, you need to fill out an application. There's the generation interconnection procedures that I referenced. There's an attachment that's a multi-page attachment. You need to fill out various information about the project, what type of fuel it's going to use, what its purpose is, where it's located, et cetera, et cetera. You need to put in an application fee. You'll probably need to engage an engineer to make a little drawing, and it really is, it's a single line drawing, so it kind of looks like a stick figure more or less, that's a schematic of how that facility is going to interconnect to the system, as well as a site plan which kind of details out how the generator is going to be located on the premises and what facilities are going to be involved in and will run in concert with that particular generator. And then I think most importantly, you need to demonstrate site control, and by that you need to either have title, you need to have a lease agreement, or some other development right or option to put that project on the land or site that you've identified. Once you do that and you submit that, PG&E will review it, and here's the timeline that's spelled out. And within not too much time, quite frankly, you'll hear back as to whether or not that application is data adequate, and if it is, they will go on and assign you a queue position. And we can go ahead and move to the next slide there, Eurydice. And from that point, the interconnection procedures dictate out a schedule that includes various studies that need to be completed. These deal with the feasibility of the project and what impacts it will have on the system. These are studies that are completed by PG&E, and they've got quite a lot of time to complete these studies. So this could take potentially up to a year to complete these studies. And it's important to note that if somebody that's ahead of you, a project that's ahead of you in the queue, happens to unravel for some reason, or a project's completed, something else happens, those studies will require revisions. And these studies have costs, and the costs need to be they're borne by the developer. And I believe the next slide, this details here what those different fees and costs are, and you can see that for the larger the facility is, those costs can get fairly considerable in a hurry. And these are purely estimates as well, and you will be billed by PG&E based on the actual time spent to complete these studies. And so such processes are really not for the faint of heart, and you can see that if you have a smaller project, the costs, of course, are quite a bit lower. And again, just referencing our FIT, all of the projects that would be submitting contracts or executing contracts under our FIT would fall under these less onerous categories, cost categories here. You can go ahead and go on. I mentioned the fast track interconnection process, and this is really geared for smaller scale projects that are using certain equipment types that have undergone certification by nationally recognized testing organizations. And this is all incredibly boring, mundane stuff that's spelled out in PG&E's wholesale distribution tariff, and it spells out what the different entities are that are qualified to test these facilities, and developers will go in and they'll see whether or not the particular generators that they're going to be putting in place meet these criteria, and if they do, it can significantly cut down on the time required in order to go through the interconnection process. So hopefully our FIT projects will be eligible for the fast track procedure. You can see here, I think on the last, the slide for the standard small generator interconnection procedures, we were looking at 100-day increments for each of the respective studies. Here we're talking about just a 60-day process here in order to get this fast track effort completed. Next slide, please. And these are just some other details here that I thought might be interesting right now. There's about 120 projects in PG&E's interconnection queue. There's actually, if you look at it, there's more numbered projects, but a lot of them are canceled or withdrawn for various considerations. And so there's actually about 100 kind of viable or hopefully viable projects as far as the developers are concerned in this queue. The highest ranked projects receive preference if there's an issue of wanting to interconnect at the same location. And I think it's also kind of interesting and neat to note that one of the projects that we have under contract is currently number 17 on this list, with 7 project completions or withdrawals ahead of it. So it's actually number 10. So other considerations continued here. Just I mentioned study updates. If various things happen, studies will need to be refreshed and costs will need to be borne by the developer. So it's important for developers to really understand what they're getting themselves into here. There will be costs along the way, and it's important for them to know that. Finally, these are just different informational sources. If you're curious about looking into this further, it's kind of exciting in a way to start thinking about some of this stuff, because we hope to have some projects coming down the line here in the very near future, and hopefully they'll be successful in negotiating these processes. And that's it. Any questions?
Director Leon, are you suffering from some deja vu here?
Oh, yeah. No,
Okay. Sorry to hear
Happy
that.
memories. Okay. Any questions? Kirby, thanks.
Yep, you're welcome.
Can I add something here?
Sure.
So, is this a process, those 250 solar power projects, some of them are mega projects, gigawatt hours, and is this a process how they're being stopped from getting tied onto the grid?
What? I don't know about it.
That the lawyer was talking about at the meeting here in December?
I don't recall exactly, but it could be a constraint, because all projects are going to have to go through a similar process. So, yeah, conceivably.
So there's 250 of them being held up by this process, okay?
I think it's 250 megawatts. So I don't know how many individual projects. Yeah.
That was Martin, that was our lawyer, and he said there were 250 projects in California that did not happen because they're hung up in this process.
Yeah.
In this process.
And
Okay.
none of them.
Yeah, some of them are pretty good.
So some of them are in innocent territory, and everything rules were written first, so PG&E's hasn't exactly been tested as much yet. But the major problem was really the fact that they didn't have any, their contracts were so bad that the utilities could cancel their contracts at any time, and so they couldn't get financing either. So that's, a number of reasons they're not going forward. But the interconnection was also, who knows what prices. This one woman got a bill for $500,000 when they gave her an estimate of $5,000 to start with.
Thank you.
my spies. Cool. Next up is our new legislative reporting requirement for the PUC on CCA utility interface issues.
Great, so I just wanted to update the board on this process. The California state budget, which was approved in October of last year, included a legislative reporting requirement for the CPUC that's going to remain in place for the current fiscal year. And this reporting requirement requires quarterly submittals that will kind of outline through a number of sections utilities' compliance with the provision that they have to cooperate fully with any community choice aggregators that investigate, pursue, or implement community choice aggregation programs. The first quarterly report is due January 31st. We were invited to participate in the process of developing material for this report about 4 weeks ago. So we've been working on it since that time. Now, there are 3 parts to the report, and the part that involves us the most is Part A. Part A is really looking to outline any issues or any matters where the CCA has asked for utility cooperation, more on an operations or technical level, but it's kind of a broad definition there. And then the utility is asked to respond, and the CPUC then kind of puts all the comments together and gives their take on how well the utility is cooperating or not fully cooperating. So we have put together 12 submittals that have been filed to date, and those were included in your packet. And there's kind of a wide range here. It starts off with some discussion about the phone banking that occurred and some kind of verifying the impacts that had. And PG&E we've requested data from them, and that's discussed in the first filing. And then there are a number of filings that relate to billing issues, which we've discussed at various board meetings here with you all. PG&E call center issues, data requests that have gone in and not been responded to, and then some opt-out process issues that are some of them more historic and some that are more current. So I won't go into all of these in detail, but I think this process will be really helpful in getting some of these outstanding issues to possibly move forward, and at the least getting them some attention and getting some information on the record about what has and hasn't been done on each of these issues. I think it'll also be helpful to other potential CCA communities that are looking at what are the mechanical barriers and issues that need to be addressed. There are then 2 other parts to the report that the CPUC is required to submit. Part B has to include a detailed description of the utilities, activities, and expenditures made to facilitate or oppose CCA programs. So this is more of a research project that the CPUC is engaged in, requesting information from PG&E on funds that they expended over the last many years. Actually, they're going back as far as 2005, we believe, at this time. So they'll be looking at funds that were spent and other resources that were allocated to either support CCA programs or to not support CCA programs. We aren't providing any formal submittal on this, but we have made some recommendations on areas that the CPUC might want to be looking at. Then in Part C of the report, this is really a section that's focused on any actions taken by the Commission, by the CPUC, to ensure that the customer opt-out requirements established by law are properly implemented. So this is another section that's being drafted by the CPUC, and we don't have any formal role in preparing that section, but we have made some recommendations and provided information to the CPUC that relates to the opt-out process that we hope will be included and hope it will be helpful. So we should have a draft of the CPUC's full report later this month, and we should have a final version by the time our board meets next month. Are there any questions? Yeah.
John, do you have is there reasonable optimism that any of these concerns will actually be dealt with, or is this simply going to be a report that's filed somewhere and forgotten?
I think there's a reasonable expectation, at least I have an expectation, that some of these issues, I would guess about half of them, will actually move forward as a result of this process. One of the things that's already occurred as part of this process is kind of a realization by the CPUC that there are not adequate resources being put forward from PG&E to respond to things that are needed in order to allow CCA program to operate. Even responding to some of the requests for information here has been a concern for the CPUC, and so there have been some discussions at higher levels towards getting more resources, more, another staff person or two that actually has the capability to respond to some of these issues. And so I think having some additional resources assigned to these issues is going to happen, and I think that will result in some movement on at least half of them. I think some of them are just rehashing things that I don't expect to see a lot of movement on, but it's important to get them into the record.
The idea would be that, would be to move those expenditures out of the, out of the reimbursement or whatever you want to call it, PG&E, push it onto the corporate side and out of these expenditures to oppose or market expenditures against. Is that the end goal here? Sort of?
I think the end goal on the analysis of expenditures is really to shed light on what has been spent to date, and that might possibly lead to future actions, future legislation, future CPUC regulations around what can and can't be spent. I think there's kind of a that's what you suggested is something that could happen. Is say there are already some requirements that say that funds need to come from the shareholder side of the pot, but then arguments can be made that all the funds ultimately come from the ratepayers, and so that division is kind of a false division anyway. So I'm not sure what all the potential outcomes might be, but the initial outcome I think is just to shed light on what's been spent to date. I think it's worth noting that there is a provision among the many CPUC regulations that once an implementation plan is filed with the CPUC in a jurisdiction, the utility in that area that serves that CCA actually can apply for and receive ratepayer revenue to help cover costs of cooperating, providing information to the CCA, and it's our understanding that PG&E is collecting revenue for that purpose. So that part of the reason for asking this question is to find out, well, are they spending that money to help a CCA and respond to data requests and that sort of thing, or not?
They may have used that money for some nice, colorful mailings. Well, I'm not sure how helpful.
I think a lot of work went into this and very detailed, and actually to me it's a disclosure document, and it's a squeaky wheel theory that that it's out there, it's in the public, and next time we squeal, maybe they'll listen a little more because we're on the record. And I think it is important to have it out there because the public can look at this, the press can look at this. At some point, you begin to load enough on there, and people will listen. So I think it's good.
Great. One other thing I should mention is the format that we had to use in filling this out is a little bit cumbersome, and so the first item that you'll see in the attachment is really a full, it's really the Part A report and a description of Part B. And we filled in the very first issue on this first form. And then the subsequent items are, we've only included the pages where our information is filled in. We haven't included the extraneous information that's really would be duplicative throughout. By the time we get a final report, we'll have the response from PG&E filled in, and then we'll have the final response from the CPUC included, and we actually have an opportunity to rebut anything that we see before it gets submitted.
Director Marshall?
What part of the legislature does this go to? Who sees it? And at the end of the rebuttal process and response process, is it appropriate and are we permitted to send it on to the AG's office, just as a matter of information?
Yeah, I anticipate this will be a public document, but it will be presented to the Budget Committee.
Budget Committee, okay.
Yes. Interesting. Yeah. Senator Leno is on the Budget Committee, head of the Budget Committee, and the CPUC seems very interested in how the Budget Committee responds to this.
Okay. Who knew? Budget.
John, how do you see this document fitting with the other one that you guys created in December?
Well, I think this document is more nitty-gritty, detailed information. It's not for the average customer or the average stakeholder to get a sense of what went on. It's really for folks that are already familiar with who we are and what our interface is with CCA. So I think it could be used as backup material, but certainly the briefing booklet provides a lot more good overview information about what we're doing and the challenges that we faced in a broad scale.
Layman's terms.
Thank you. Good report. Next item up is the general regulatory update.
Yeah. And just so you know, there is one item after the regulatory update, and so I know this is usually the end of the line, so don't get your hopes up.
Yeah, there's a backside to these agendas.
Yeah.
Some minor work items up there.
So just starting from the top, just to sum up, one of the key things that we've been working on, especially Kirby, who's been doing a great job on this, is with the PG&E general rate case. So recently we filed opening briefs, and our key issue continues to be the conservation incentive adjustment. There's also going to be reply briefs coming up, and we will continue to focus on that issue. There are other issues also in the general rate case, but that is the key one. Next, the Energy Resource Recovery Account, ERA. So this docket is. They came to a final commission decision for this year's ERA in December. And there is a statement of future potential actions, because this really does interrelate with the direct access OIR, which is the docket that the exit fees were placed into. And so to the extent there's movement there, these two interrelate very closely. And so we're just going to see how things develop with regards to exit fees and go from there. In the CCA docket, one of the key thing that's happening there is the CCA bond. So there was a bond settlement, of which we were not a party to that settlement. Neither was the City and County of San Francisco. So San Francisco Power was not a party to that. That was brought to the commission, and we provided comments on modifications that we would like to see to that methodology that are more workable solutions for an actual up and running CCA and one that's looking to launch. And so there was it was, I believe, held on the last, it was not on the commission agenda in December, but it is on the commission agenda in January. So we're following that, and we'll be moving forward on that docket. Next, John gave a really great overview on the direct access docket, which is where the exit fees have landed. So I don't think I really need to touch on that. The workshops, the series of workshops were extremely productive. It really it was the opportunity for sort of the utilities to air their proposal of what they'd like to see the structure look like for these exit fees and the green adders, and then the ESP parties, sort of the direct access and CCA folks, also presented on what our theory is, and aired a couple of additional ideas of how we could really come to a conclusion in short order on this. And there was a couple of procedural changes that I won't bore you with, but that expedite certain portions of the schedule to ensure that this docket will conclude in a timely fashion in May. Next, regarding the CHP settlement, this was something that was brought up to you in the last meeting. This relates to a settlement, I feel like I'm repeating myself, to which MEA was not a party that would impose obligations on us. And this one relates to an obligation to procure combined heat and power, so QF, qualifying facilities. And this is a large overarching settlement that deals with extremely wide range of issues. Unfortunately, it was the choice of the settling parties to impose certain obligations on us. And so we filed comments and reply comments at the commission. However, no changes were made to the final decision. So there's still a couple of steps going forward. The settlement has to be approved by FERC, and there's still a lot of components of that. There's not a lot of clarity. So we're working with a consortium of folks to get a better understanding of that, and continue to move forward there since the decision has been made by the commission. Another item that I brought up to you in last meeting is with regards to an application that was made by PG&E that requested equity funds to buy into a solar production facility. We don't view this as an appropriate use of ratepayer funds, and it would also be put onto not the generation side, but the T&D side, and be collected from ratepayers under those categories. It's not a large number. I believe it's around 40 million, but just out of principle and how it impacts us, we need to make sure our voice is heard that this is not how things should be running at the commission. So both Dan and I attended the pre-hearing conference on this, and so the schedule is to be determined. The next item is EE, which there hasn't been any movement on. That stalled at the end of last year, and since the commission is turning over, it looks like there might be a little bit of a wait for more guidance on how CCAs can access energy efficiency funds. And then let's see, a couple of other items. One relates to the long-term procurement plan. And this is just starting to gear up. There was a pre-hearing conference that Dan and I also attended. And there's actually an information session this coming week, which I'll be attending. And this really, our interest here is to ensure that PG&E doesn't continue to over-procure. And PG&E's over-procurement impacts us insofar as there are these stranded costs that then they can pass through back to us. It was interesting in the commission meeting on December 16th, there was a reference that in about 2020, I think the year was, PG&E would have a 44% excess capacity factor, or something along those lines. I mean, this is so far beyond what their needs should be that we really need to be involved here. And so there aren't any specific action items until February, but it's something that I'm getting up to speed on, and Dan is working with his clients as well on that. So we'll be involved there. Another item that
Beth, on that one, before you leave it, the long-term procurement plan, that's a stunning figure given all the rhetoric that was going around Marin County and other places in 02, 03. I remember even while I was on the Board of Supervisors, or maybe before, we were screaming about a peaker plant proposed for Novato. And the argument then was that we're way under served, and so it's hard to believe we could be at 40% over capacity in 20 years.
Yeah, I can't recall the exact figures, so I wouldn't quote it. I can come up with the exact figures for you. And it was just sort of hearsay. It was something referenced by one of the commissioners, but it is disconcerting to us. And this also relates to the next item that's on here, which is a very large gas-fired facility that there was an unusual procedural change with regards to this plant that we're still determining what the impact will be on us for how that would impact our PCIA and exit fee costs, but it's a very large cost, a very unusual procedural mechanic that they used, which was on the last meeting of the year before a couple of the commissioners left. So we're looking at that as well. I mean, these all relate to these over procurement issues and how this is being dealt with at the commission. So those sort of work closely together. One that isn't on your list here, another docket, I believe it's R12-10-007 for people who like to keep track, relates to, which you all do, which you all do.
The person's out in the lobby on her phone.
Yeah, everybody look it up on your Blackberries because this is exciting. It relates to energy storage. There was some legislation that requires the Public Utilities Commission to look at what energy storage requirements could be imposed on different folks, and included in the order instituting rulemaking, it references CCAs. So, there are some initial steps coming up at the end of the month, around the 21st. And so we're going to look at I will be looking at the legislation and determining, what does the legislation say, how, one of the issues that we've been confronting as Don discussed last time is what is the role of the Public Utilities Commission in regulating us, since we're under a very different set of rules and structures than the investor-owned utilities and even the ESPs. And so we'll be looking at this from that perspective and go from there. So that, I believe, wraps up my brief regulatory summary. We've been busy. And all the regulatory filings will be emailed out to you. Don't kill too many trees.
Please let us know if you would like a hard copy.
It's probably 150 or 200 pages.
Even I'll take electronic.
Yeah, I think that most people probably just want electronic, and you can pick and choose the ones all of them that you want to pour over and read at night and on weekends.
Director Liam?
You find, that you're congealing with in these lobbying efforts, what groups or other, besides San Joaquin, who we have a long relationship with, who else do you find you're sort of in the same boat?
Yeah, it actually really varies on a case-by-case basis. Sure. For CCA matters, we've been working a lot with San Francisco, obviously, because they're very close to launching. And so on CCA specific matters, we work with them. In addition, a lot of, we're really in the same boat in favor of competitive markets as the direct access providers. We also have, and Dan has a lot of customers that are both direct access customers and also direct access providers. There's also municipal departing load. We have things in common with them. And we've also, we also have commonalities with TURN and DRA. It just sort of depends, and in some cases, since we want to encourage people to conserve and send the right signals, it depends on who we're aligned with, but usually it's more the CCA, direct access, DA folks. It varies, but.
Other questions? Awesome, thank you.
Great.
Really appreciate that the last 4 agenda items have been sort of technical in nature, but they're really valuable education pieces for us. So we're just absorbing the wisdom. So don't take the quiet as lack of interest. I really appreciate it. There's a lot of good homework in there. Good. Okay. Next item is bank loan refi.
So this is a really exciting item, and I'm going to say a little bit about it and then turn it over to Beth to add a little more. But just by way of background, in order to launch the Marin Energy Authority and our initial year of implementation, we we undertook a couple of efforts. We received a startup loan from the County of Marin for $540,000. We also received generous loans from individuals in our community in the amount of $750,000. And then we also acquired a loan for a term loan from River City Bank for $950,000, and then a working capital loan also from River City Bank for $500,000. Both of the loans from River City Bank were tied to a guarantee. One guarantee was offered up by the County of Marin, and then Fairfax, the town of Fairfax, also offered up a guarantee for a portion of the working capital loan. So at this point, we've been working with the bank over the last month or so, a couple of months actually, to look at how we might refinance all of our debt into one loan that would be spread out over a longer period, as we had originally intended in our business planning. And so the proposed refinancing that we have before you tonight, that's in your packet, would be in the amount of $2,300,000. And this loan would simplify the all of our debt and incorporate it into just this one loan and allow us to pay off some of the other debt that I just mentioned. So there are several structural changes that are going to result in this action that's being proposed tonight. The first is the replacement of the guarantees that are in place by the County of Marin and the town of Fairfax with a modest debt service reserve that's provided by MEA, and we've already made provisions to provide for that. Then the second change would be an extension of the loan term. This not only reduce our monthly debt service costs, but allows us to have a little bit more flexibility in how we do our financing and how we structure our finances. Then the next area that's changing is we'd be setting a fixed interest rate rather than a fluctuating interest rate. And the last main change is that there would be a change to the source of payment to the lender. So there would no longer be a need for funds to come through the revenue account that we have in place with Shell Energy. And so this simplifies our security agreement with Shell Energy, and we've been able to make some revisions to that document as well, and that's why that document is attached in your board packet here. Beth did a great job of creating a table here that lays out the primary changes, and I'm going to turn it over to her to get into any of that.
Great. Well, we're all really excited about this. I think that this refinancing really represents a change from sort of startup mode and sort of the unknowns related to launching the first CCA in California to actual operations and having revenue and you know, having our source of income and rolling in customers. So the result is a really significant structural change in both the security package and also the term of the loan. So what there is as agenda item 10, there's 3 components to it. One is the loan and the accompanying resolution. Then we also have necessary changes to the security agreement that we have with Shell. And then third is the budget changes that just reflect the fact that, you know, we have to pay a small bank fee. We also, it also reflects the principal that we're bringing in and paying out. So, so just from the first, you'll recognize this credit agreement because it's exactly the same form that we used the last time, but just with the structural changes that we indicated, which is, you know, we're going to have, rather than having a guarantee in place with the County of Marin, a guarantee in place with the town of Fairfax, you know, it just recognizes that we're a standalone entity, and it's pretty customary to have debt service reserve, and so we have our debt service reserve is 6 months of our debt service, but it's really important to note that our debt service is changing dramatically from over $150,000 a month to around $44,000 a month. So that really frees up a lot of cash flow over the course of the year to reduce rates, start programs, and, you know, just operate our business in a more efficient way. So those are the key changes in the credit agreement. And then when you look at the security agreement, the way that the security agreement was structured before is there was a $50,000 lender reserve that related to the county guarantee, and then furthermore, we were reserving 1 month of debt service in advance. So for the following month, we had that month reserve in our account. So that's $150,000. So totaling $200,000 in total. And so this is going to be dramatically simplified insofar as the lender is not going to be part of the security arrangement with Shell. So this is a really, really positive move. There's one additional clarification in here, and it just relates to Shell's policies that relate to the revenue account, and also just the requirement that we have to provide proof of repayment of our current debt, which is, that's exactly what we're doing with the refinancing. We're not taking on debt, we're just paying off other sources to clean up the structure of our debt internally. Next, the third component here is the budget changes that would be required, and there's also another sort of a cleanup change. One is the inclusion of the new loan amount. So the refinancing amount is $2.3 million. So that isn't now included in our budget. And it would also, there's also a change in an increase in interest and principal payments made because we're making the entirety of our principal payments to our previous lender, and then we're going to make our usual debt service payments going forward. Loan fees, the loan fee is $12,500. That's the cost of refinancing, and then we'll also have to pay the attorney's fees of the bank, but which have been capped. And then just the miscellaneous sort of cleanup item for the budget is a shift from miscellaneous expenses to office supplies and postage. So that's just knowing more what our operating has been. And so just sort of getting to what our recommendations are is first that we would approve the resolution and the credit agreement and authorizing Charles and Dawn to execute those. Next, it would be, our recommendation is to approve the amended and restated security agreement, which I should explain that briefly. There were two options available to us. One would be to amend the security agreement, and then the other one is to amend and restate the agreement. And since there were a lot of changes with removing things, it was much, much simpler, less brain damage, and also a lot cleaner of a document to amend and restate. So this is substantially the same form, but then it removes the lender components from the document. And so we recommend to approve the amended and restated security agreement, and we also recommend that the budget adjustments be approved. And so it's sort of the three are really just viewed together as one change.
Craig, is it legal for us to take one action to do all three?
I'd like to do is actually do the credit agreements. This has a resolution to do that separately. So one motion on the credit agreement, and then you have a second and motion after that first one's adopted on the security agreement and also on the budget amendment.
Okay. If I may point out to my board colleagues, if you look at the third attachment about the budget update and compare it to the one that was on our consent calendar through November 30th, the good news is the refinancing, instead of having a $2 million fund balance at the end of our coming fiscal year on March 31, we'll end up with a $2.4 million fund balance. So this not only takes the taxpayer completely out of our agency and sort of gets us where we belong, financed and working with the private sector, it also improves our cash flow and gives us an even better year-end fund balance than we had thought a month ago. And the terms are pretty damn good, at 5.25% interest rate and good terms. I want to tip my hat to Beth and Dawn, everybody. I'll also just say for our friends in the audience, I got a phone call from the CEO of River City Bank, and he made it very clear that we've got a pretty darn good executive team. Yeah. Yes, sir. Director Leon, please. Questions are welcome.
I know this is like Monday morning quarterbacking because you've been wading through this and you don't have a lot of options as well. So, but you're obviously aware of some of the restrictions in here, like tie your hands to a variety of ways of things you might contemplate doing, like say advances to a development project. You're not be allowed to do that kind of thing. But the one thing I think you should try to see if you could change is the participations. Obviously banks want to participate out their obligations. You should have the right to approve who they participate to, because if it's it may be an entity you would rather not have them you should reasonably be able to approve who they participate to. Rather than just carte blanche.
Yeah, on that one, I mean, that was the same participation language that we used in the last agreement.
There are, I think at this point it would be difficult to make that type of change without having to bring this back to the board for approval later, but it is something that we could consider taking up as a side letter if it was of interest to the board.
Or an amendment, a very simple amendment. I don't know if that would be a workable solution.
Oh, it's just something to point out because you should be in control of who your bank group is, because you could take on someone else who's going to drive you crazy. So
yeah.
Something to think about.
There's an assumption that we might use side letters to get approvals to incur indebtedness for future phases or projects anyway. So maybe this thing ought to be brought up then.
Yeah. So I think that there's a couple of things to note, and just for the benefit of the board, River City Bank has made it very clear that they want to be working with us long term, and so they like the banking relationship that we have with them, and so I don't foresee too much shifting to other banks, just given our conversations that we've had with them. And the second point related to additional indebtedness. So we initially had put in some additional indebtedness provisions, and it started to get extremely complicated. And so the way that we started to look at it is that we would either create an amendment at the time that we're looking at debt. River City Bank has been really great to work with, and so we're not too concerned about that, because you could just add one item to the schedule in the back rather than create the whole suite of, one of our key concerns was keeping our attorney's fees low, and so the way that we got to keeping our attorney's fees at $5,000 for the bank, which is, thank you, is by making very few changes.
That's one lunch for him.
Yeah.
Attorney Collins here is feeling ripped off.
They think it's going to come in under that, actually.
Yeah, so when we started looking, we did look at the additional debt provisions, and our options included either really having immediate expenses now for only a possibility, which could be addressed at a later point in time. We decided that it would be a lot more efficient to look at that when the time came, and make sure it's a workable solution. See if you may end up just taking out the whole debt, but we don't foresee that in the next couple of years in any event. This is a really workable solution for a while for us. These are really great terms, and it gets us where we want to be from a sort of debt service and operations perspective. So we did consider that.
Yeah, no, I'm not concerned about the debt so much as you find, especially these smaller projects,
Yeah.
And it may have changed in 20 years, whatever it's been, but a lot of developers will ask you for advances because they're not cash rich, a lot of smaller guys. You know, you
Yeah.
say, hey, help me out, I've tied up this site, I've tied up this, you know, but I need some, in advance it goes on back end, so.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and again, River City has been really great to work with, and so I think that, you know, we'll continue to have a really good working relationship with them.
One thing I neglected to mention is that the draft loan documents were reviewed by Nixon Peabody and also Richards, Watson, Gershaw, and Greg's firm to look at various aspects and make sure that these documents were put together the right way. We also had some great support from Jim Gibbs, Berry Capital, who's in the audience. Thank you for your help on this. And also a lot of support from our ad hoc advisor, Peter Luchetti, who's not here, but we're really grateful to him for helping to get this pulled together as well.
Great. Director Thornton, did you have a question?
I would just like to say thank you so much to the staff for negotiating these terms and all of the coordination between the various agreements and all of that type of stuff. It sounds like it's an excellent step forward, both for operating, for the basis for the organization and the contracts themselves, and to be able to pay back the loans that we've had so far.
We're really excited about that part.
Yes, we all
means
are.
a lot to us.
Indeed.
You know, this is a "we told you so" document.
We told you so way ahead of schedule.
Who might that be? Some of our friends. Yep. Former friends. Very good. This is good. I know I'm getting ahead of myself because I haven't called the question yet, but if and when this passes, can we make sure to create a letter for Fairfax, kind of similar to the ones we're doing for the citizen lenders?
Yeah.
Thanking them for their prior cosign.
And we can see when their next board meeting is.
Yeah, perhaps that would be good.
It's nice to get a news flash to each of the board members so that we can pass this on to our
Oh, yeah, that's a good idea.
less skeptic members. Yeah.
Yeah.
Perhaps Tuesday afternoon or sometime around then would be a good chance.
A tweet.
That's actually a good point. I think that's actually on your to-do list. Yeah.
Thanks for
Good.
volunteering, Leslie.
No problem.
Very good. Public comment on the proposed credit agreement with River City Bank? Yes, sir.
Two comments. One, everything I've seen and heard this evening, it sounds like the gals have done a great job on this, and full credit to them for it. I wonder if, given some of the background and history on the board, some of the skills and abilities, it might not be a good idea to get staff to float an early draft past you people for possible input when things like this come up in the future. And then sort of as an aside, didn't I read in the IJ just the other day that you were being quoted as saying that you were going to finish the year debt-free and $2 million in the bank?
Not debt-free, but taxpayer risk removed. I don't know the quote, but I haven't been saying debt-free because
I'm not surprised that with the reality, it's just it seemed that the quote was different in the IJ. It surprised me at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think I hope I've been very careful not to imply debt-free because we would have to refi to get the taxpayer paid off. But I think the main mission here was enhanced cash flow, better terms, and getting the taxpayer completely removed as to risk. That's a big deal. No cosign left and no loan left.
It's a much cleaner structure. It's very good for us.
On the point raised about whether we've been involved, I'll confess that Don and I spent some good weekend time working over potential term sheets and updates and some of those details, so I did have a good look well in advance a couple times. Other comments or questions? If not, then I'll call the question on approval of the credit agreement with River City Bank for the $2.3 million refinancing.
Right, Mr. Shell, this will be the adoption of the resolution that has been prepared to approve the loan documents.
Good. Do you need a roll call? Actually, I think we need a motion, first of all.
We will need a motion first.
Anyone want to move this?
So moved.
Director Collins?
Second.
Thornton? And then, did you want us to do a roll call, or can we just do it by?
Yeah, it's going to be unanimous, it's no problems.
Okay. Is there any opposition to the motion? Congratulations. Yeah! Whew. So the taxpayer is hereby removed. There's another, I told you so. Next request for action is the amendment to the security agreement with Shell Energy.
The amended and restated security agreement, sorry.
Right.
Approval
What she
of
said.
the amended and restated security agreement with Shell Energy North America.
And you could combine it with,
And you could also add the budget amendment at the same time, in the same motion.
Let's take the budget amendment separately. I just want to say one last. I told you so. Good, on the,
I move that we approve the amended and restated security agreement with Shell Energy North America.
Second.
and just on this issue, again, congratulations. We're dealing with grown-ups. I mean, Shell Energy knows what they're doing, and you guys have done an excellent job of standing tall and negotiating well. Any public comment on this proposed security agreement? Is there, let's see, we already have a motion and a second, I think.
Yeah.
Is there any opposition? Very good, congratulations, it's unanimous. And then again, on the budget amendment, if you think back to where we were a year ago, in early January, I think by this point in the week in early January, we'd had 3 or 4 council sessions and a supervisor hearing that wasn't that easy going. And then we come here a year forward and we're adjusting our budget upward by another $400,000. Again, my sincere gratitude to you, Don and Beth and the team for just some amazing work. We've got feed-in tariff, we've got net metering programs, we've got new renewable energy that we're buying in our own economy, and we're putting $2.4 million on the bottom line as reserves, and the taxpayer's gone. Damn straight.
And Joe Nation's moved on to another topic.
Yeah. Let the record show how glad I am I don't see him every day.
That was about a year, wasn't that about a year ago? Or?
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
It's probably
The daily dose.
The daily dose.
Yeah.
Joe. So I don't suppose there's a motion on this one to approve our amended budget for the year?
So moved.
Second.
Any public comment on the budget? Seeing none, is there any opposition?
No.
Congratulations again, that passes.
Thank you.
Congratulations, everybody. It's great news.
Yes, thank you.
Motion to adjourn?
One more.
Or other board members?
Any staff?
Any staff or board announcements? Any staff updates or anything? Any board updates? I have none either. Okay, with that, we can adjourn. Congrats.
All right. Very good. Seriously, like the last 3 meetings we've had, I'm like, it's going to go to, no doubt about it.